A pop star's cinematic event smashes records while a megastar's passion project struggles, revealing a major shift in what draws audiences to the theaters. Meanwhile, a groundbreaking deal in West Africa is tearing down colonial era barriers, creating a new unified film market. We'll be delving into all these stories and more right here on the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thanks for joining me for this episode of the Film Mandate. So we'll be delving into the very first story, and you already know. I mean, if you've been following the news, and if you're a music fan and also a film fan, I'm sure by now you've already heard and you already know. And one of the exciting news in this era is how Dwayne Johnson's film, The Smashing Machine, has sort of given way, or in certain description, has not been able to smash the box office as usual that he's able to do with his kind of films. However, we now have Taylor Swift, whose film actually is termed as a cinematic music debut rather than a non-film, is actually dominating the box office instead. And finally, clear reviews as to what it made in the theaters has been revealed, and it has made an amount of $50 million plus. And this actually is an article that was released by the, it was an article that was released, or a press release instead, that was released on the AMC Theater website. And I felt it wise that we read it and see what it has to offer. So for some reason, looks like the text is hidden. Pardon me for that. Yeah, so let's take a quick read. It says that with more than $34 million in domestic box office and more than $50 million globally for the 1 week only event, Taylor Swift, the official release party of A Showgirl, is now a record-setting box office smash hit that delighted fans worldwide. The cinematic experience event is now the biggest album debut event in cinema history, domestically and globally. Taylor Swift, the official release party of A Showgirl, which earned an A+ cinema score, was released by AMC Theaters in partnership with Variance Films in the United States and Canada, and in partnership with Piece of Magic Entertainment internationally. Taylor Swift is a global icon, a record-setting artist, and once again a box office champion. Swift's self-directed 1 weekend only Taylor Swift, the official release party of A Showgirl album debut cinematic experience, is officially the #1 title at the box office, both domestically and globally. The unprecedented success was driven by a 3-day domestic box office of $34 million and an international box office of $16 million. Globally, the event earned more than $50 million for its 1 weekend run. Announced just 2 Fridays ago, the Taylor Swift, the official release party of A Showgirl theatrical event, was timed to coincide with Swift's 12th studio album, The Life of a Showgirl, beginning at 3 p.m. ET on Friday, October 3rd. The Swifties took their celebrations to movie theaters, singing and dancing to the new album. So that is how successful Taylor Swift's, non-film, cinematic events at the theaters was able to achieve for the audiences. And this speaks to how there is indeed a shift as to how audiences want to even experience their cinema, films in the theaters. I think if you check this year in particular, how things have shifted, you realize that films, particularly perhaps this may be a clear example, may, although still different, but something that you can draw an analogy between is the Minecraft, the movie. And Minecraft, the movie had audiences, particularly the Gen Alphas and maybe the Gen Zs, whose approach to cinema watching is more of an activity than just observing the film playing out on the screen. And for those who were in touch with the news items that came around that time, there was a time that even the cinemas decided to organize a special screening where audiences can come and have fun, the chicken jerky kind of experience in the cinemas where they could, go a little wild rather than just sit down and watch the film on screen. So it looks like time has evolved to the extent that the new generation of cinema going audiences perhaps want to experience things differently than the older generation have. But Taylor Swift as an individual is an icon in her own regard, and her her business acumen and she being in touch with her audience shows the power of social capital. And it doesn't mean that Dwayne Johnson couldn't pull off um, a thing or such a thing, but I think perhaps one way or the other, when it comes to Dwayne Johnson's ability to, um, in terms of him pivoting from the popcorn movies, maybe audiences are not really in touch with that. But it could point to a whole number of factors, of which a number of them was captured in the BBC article and other articles, that perhaps the target audience are not really the movie going type or the cinema going type, and that could have resulted in that. There could be several factors as to why that is the case. But what interests me so much is the fact that Dwayne Johnson sort of has accepted the fact that you can't control the box office. It may go in your favor one time, and in another season, it may not work out the way you are expecting. And this actually can be seen in the BBC article, which I feel like I want to read his exact statement that he made. So the title says that Dwayne Johnson is philosophical over his film flop, The Smashing Machine. And he says that Dwayne the Rock Johnson has taken a philosophical approach to his latest film underperforming at the box office. The Smashing Machine, a sports drama about MMA legend McKay. It took just $5.9 million at the US box office, and on an underperforming debut for one of Johnson's films. His successes include the Fast and Furious franchise and Jumanji films. Writing on Instagram, the star framed the results as a creative achievement rather than a financial disappointment. In our storytelling world, you can't control box office results, he wrote. But what I realized you can control is your performance and your commitment to completely disappear and go elsewhere. I will always run to that opportunity, he continued. It was my honor to transform in this role for my director, Benny Savdi. Thank you, brother, for believing in me. Truth is, this film has changed my life. He signed off his post saying, with deep gratitude, respect, and radical empathy, DJ. So I like this statement that he has made in particular, owing to the fact that, to try to venture into a new territory and be faced with such a dramatic turn, which is unlike any other thing that, I mean, for quite a long time has preceded this event. It could be quite heartbreaking, and it could possibly or potentially cause him to even want to rescind his decisions in terms of delving into such obscure project, for lack of a better word, indie project than the typical studio Hollywood big blockbuster kind of popcorn movies. So it is indeed heartwarming to see him still, bent on pursuing this line of work where he wants to delve into more character driven projects or more method acting, which may not necessarily be a box office darling. And I'm glad that he's realized that this is a process and it may not go the way he's usually used to. So I like that kind of spirit that he's exhibiting here. But time would actually tell whether he will stick to this line of work or line of acting and projects. That will all be dependent on the next film he'll be making, whether he may return to the popcorn movies. Obviously, he has already stated somewhere, I think in an article or two, that he is not completely abandoning those kinds of projects. So we should not be surprised that from time to time he returns to such big franchises and unleashes who he truly is, The Rock, in those movies. Some of the reasons that perhaps others have attributed to him not having much success with this particular franchise is the fact that, I mean, not necessarily, not in terms of creative wise, but in terms of box office, could be that people couldn't identify him as Dwayne The Rock Johnson on screen due to the prosthetics that was administered on his face to make him look more like Macaire than himself. And I think it was a good creative choice he made just to be able to, move away from being the regular Dwayne Johnson people actually see on screen to the likes of, being completely absorbed and disappear into the character portrayal of being Macaire. So it is quite understandable that perhaps due to this reason, a number of audiences who are used to enjoying the presence that is Dwayne Johnson on screen may want to defer away from this project. Maybe perhaps wait and watch it on screen. There is another article that even said that the majority of the over 200 million UFC fans who might not have gone to watch, is it 200, perhaps even 500 million or so, might not have gone to watch this project is due to the fact that majority of this audience prefer watching the UFC fights in the comfort of their homes in their couch. So it could be that this large audience may not necessarily like to go to the cinemas as such. And estimations portrayed pointed to the fact that of the is it 80% 80% or so males that went to the theater to watch these films were between the ages of 18 to 35 or 37, meaning that a large chunk of the cinema going audience that are male actually above 35 or 37 or so didn't really go, meaning that they could have changed how the box office opening for the Smashing Machine would have gone had it been quite different. So regardless, I like the fact that Dwayne The Rock Johnson is sticking to his guns and not changing his thoughts on giving up on pursuing films that are much more obscure or characters that are much more obscure than what we usually know him to be. So it is indeed quite a commendable effort of him pursuing this vision of his without giving up on it. So that is quite indeed commendable, I must say. But for the success that Taylor Swift has achieved, I must indeed say that it then opens a myriad of possibilities, not necessarily for the likes of her. What I mean by the likes of her is those who are musicians, but like the kind of leadership or the kind of experience that they usually do with the listening party thing in the cinemas, but also with regards to directors themselves. I can foresee perhaps a time coming when maybe directors may team up with, creatives like, Taylor Swift, musicians to sort of capture a cinematic film of a sort to put in the cinemas and see how that will fare. In times past, that has happened before, where you had the I think the likes of Mark Jackson and I don't know whether it's Spiel. Honestly, I'm blanking out on the director's name who directed his Thriller and all those things. So those were more or less like a cinematic music video. So it is very possible that we're going to have a number of projects in this very vein, seeing that it is very successful. But what would what all this will come to would be whether the musician in particular has that clout to draw audiences like Taylor Swift is able to do, because Taylor Swift seems to be a very unique artist altogether, being so in touch with the audience, and even the audience see her as their friend rather than just a pop icon who is so high up there that they can't relate to. So indeed, Taylor Swift is one in a million or one in a billion, where you can't, to replicate her success, you may have to actually be your audience's friends. And even for that reason, it may not even work out the way you would anticipate. So it is a case study that I believe a lot of people will be studying now to see how best they can decode it and possibly replicate it for themselves. And I think it's going to get both the music, those from the music section and those from the film sections thinking loud and see how best they can marry both worlds and make that a possibility. I think perhaps the films that are likely to succeed in this area may be the musicals, but it still boils down to the star power of the lead who may be cast in the film. But the amazing thing with Taylor Swift's success is the fact that she didn't do any major promotion like the way films usually do, where you have Oscar films like, Oscar potential worthy films like The Smashing Machine and Paul Thomas Anderson's film, One Battle After Another, shelling, huge sums of money to promote the films, weeks ahead of its release. And yet this film led to quite a success in the cinema just by announcing 2 Fridays away before it was released. It was still able to rally a lot of people to go into the cinemas to watch. So it speaks of how powerful of an artist and an icon she is. That is Taylor Swift is. And besides, she's actually a director as well. So she's been able to marry the worlds of cinema and also music and be able to provide what they call a non-film but a cinematic experience all the same for her fans. I can imagine, because amazingly, it also didn't open on a Saturday. Neither did it even open in the morning of the Friday it released, but it released around 3 p.m. upwards. And for just a 3 day event, is it a 3 or 2 day event, to amass $50 million worldwide is quite an amazing success. I can imagine if it had opened on the Thursday towards maybe another weekend as well, I'm sure she would have easily nabbed, 500, nabbed potentially maybe 60 million upwards. It's very possible. But the amazing thing is that it looks like Taylor Swift really knows her audience very well. She knows what the audience wants, to the extent that it is of no surprise that her first one, the Eras tour, which was showed in the cinemas, which was a collection of the tours she went on that particular project, was able to nab north of $250 million. So she knows what she has, and she knows her audience so well to be able to make this work for her. And maybe her success can never be replicated by any other artist in ever again. But I think it bodes very well for musical artists and maybe directors or even filmmakers in general to study and understand how she's able to achieve this success with with literally no promotion whatsoever, and yet was the number one film this weekend. And it's amazing, particularly when you have films that's with such star power like Leonardo DiCaprio, you have Benicio del Toro, Dwayne the Rock Johnson, and none of these films was even able to make half the money she was able to make just this past weekend. So that is indeed amazing. And honestly, I look forward to what she has next in store with regards to the cinematic theater experience and what will become of it. So that is quite amazing. And let me know what you think with regards to these two. I mean, it's not necessarily opposing views, but experiences or encounters that has happened in the cinema with Dwayne the Rock Johnson accepting that, listen, you can't control the box office, but at least you can control your performance. And what Taylor Swift was able to achieve with and with AMC coming up with a press release statement to state how successful the Taylor Swift non-film has been at the cinemas. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section down below. So we'll be delving into our last story for the day because I treated the first two stories as I just part, two sides of a coin. And I mean, the first story could have been the next Barbie Heimer, just as we had Barbie and Oppenheimer, making such a good pair in the cinemas at the time of its release. Unfortunately, this didn't work out the way we were all anticipating. However, there is a wonderful thing happening on the shores of Africa, and to be quite specific, is happening in West Africa. And this has to do with the fact that the Black Star International Film Festival, which is headed by none other than the erstwhile Juliet, erstwhile executive secretary of the National Film Authority, who is also now, I mean, still actually the would I say the CEO of the Black Star International Film Festival, has been able to, nab one of the record-breaking deals in Africa. I mean, because it's starting from West Africa, but I know it's still going to move from there to, other parts of Africa, and that is quite exciting. And this has to do with being able to forge a deal between the Black Star International Film Festival and three other distribution companies, particularly to distribute films from Anglophone countries to the Francophone countries and the reverse as well. This article actually dropped about a week ago, and it is captured in the Deadline news article, of which I want to display here. So this is what the article has to say. So it reads that Ghana's Black Star International Film Festival locks deal with Ivory Coast Majestic Cinemas to expand film distribution between Francophone and Anglophone West Africa. So it says that Ghana's Black Star International Film Festival has locked a unique distribution deal partnership with Majestic Cinemas, the Ivory Coast's largest cinema chain, to expand the distribution of feature films between Francophone and Anglophone West Africa. The deal also includes the cooperation of Cine Kita, one of the region's top dubbing and subtitling houses, and the Nigerian studio Nile Group, led by Moses Babatope. As part of the deal, all three institutions will aid in the distribution of English language African films to Francophone territories, while also reversing the flow by introducing French language African films to English speaking regions. The pact will work as a four-step process. Number one, the coalition of companies will be given a first look at all official selections of the Black Star International Film Festival. Selected films will be professionally dubbed and subtitled by Cine Kita, and the Now Group will handle distribution, while Majestic Cinemas will guarantee theatrical placement. So that is quite exciting to have this happening in Africa this particular time. And I'm excited about this development due to the fact that I've always wanted to see Africa have a unified market, and we are finally having this happening because our countries are too small in terms of the markets. They are too small and even so fragmented that no one film, I mean, I may be mistaken, but no one film has been able to make their monies back completely with breaking even and making profit. And so to have the unified market where you can have films not just exist even among just the Anglophone countries, or let's say if it has to do with the Francophone countries, just have films exist within the Francophone countries, but to cross borders, in terms of the language barrier to cross, is indeed an amazing opportunity because in this case, just a few, a few selection of cinemas will have these films premiere or screen there and still be able to make enough money to possibly or potentially break even and also make some profits. And that is the way to go in Africa if we want to really compete on the global stage among the film markets of, let's say, India, China, and the North American film markets. That is the only way we can actually be able to recoup our monies and then elevate the production value of films on the continent. Because as it stands now, we don't have access like such a leverage of access into the markets as compared to the other, film markets. So South Korea has, one way or the other, some film, markets or penetration into the American film markets as well as the Asian market. But for the African market or for African films and filmmakers, we don't have that much access into those territories. So the best way is to look within, forge our own unified markets and stay within, because with time, once we are able to consistently deliver on the numbers or the data, that is really going to help. And one of the things I've always said and I've advocated for is the fact that because we lack these three main proponents that can help build our industry in terms of data, number one, data, infrastructure, and also policy, policies by governments that are enforced. Without these things, we always find ourselves handicapped with filmmakers making movies and then being left on the shelf as it doesn't get the necessary attention it deserves. Now, with this particular initiative taken by Madame Juliet Asante, it is indeed a great opportunity to have what otherwise wouldn't have been possible, but now possible, to have the films travel to certain parts of Africa that ordinarily wouldn't even have the opportunity to do so. And language barrier has been one of the major bane of free flow of, let's say, communication or even movement in Africa. And quite recently, I also did a report on Ramsey Noah's, is it Icon Advocate. They also had a collaboration with a Ugandan film production company to think about how to also unify the countries, form partnerships and collaborations in order to make sure that our films can travel far. And I'm glad that there seems to be a renaissance happening now to ensure that this becomes a reality, because there is no way we can make our industry work properly with our fragmented individual countries. Every country is too small, coupled with the socioeconomic difficulties in all these countries. There is no way we can make it on our own. When we unite, we will be able to make that happen. And I'm glad that it looks like stakeholders from different countries all over are realizing that on the continent and are pushing for it to make that happen. Even we have the likes of Mo Abudu, who has been a pioneering agent in making some of these things happen by starting, is it Ebony Life on Stream as a streaming service to help make this also a possibility. So to have other, individuals also come into the picture with Juliet Asante having run the BSIFF for over a decade, finally making this happen is quite exciting. And you also have Idris Elba, who is pushing to get ultra modern studios, internationally standard studios to be built in some countries in Africa, which I believe is distributed evenly to help uplift the whole production industry in Africa. So it is indeed an exciting time. This year in particular has been some quite an exciting time to see all these things happening, from what Ramsey Noah and others are doing, and what Juliet Asante is doing in Africa together with these other three companies. I think even this is perhaps one of the biggest break, because the key challenge has always been the language barrier in Africa. And for this initiative to be put in place is such a great deal. And I mean, congratulations to all of them wherever they are. I'm sure they are not watching this, so obviously they may not hear it. But regardless, what they've done is a major break in the film industry in Africa. Once this takes off fully and becomes fully operational, I can guarantee you it's going to change the film landscape. My only concern is that proper data ought to be kept. Without this data, we can't, we need data, proper data on how many films are performing well, to what tune of amount are they performing, what are the conditions that necessitated the success. And also, these infrastructures ought to be put in place, because without the necessary data, cinemas can't be built. And I mean, I'm speaking from the angle where investors would want to see the data to check whether investing in the industry, let's say putting up cinemas, would it be worth it? Would it be worth their investment? So these are things that ought to be discussed. And I also believe that policy is necessary. Perhaps when these data proves how well the industry can perform, particularly towards the 2030, when we are aiming at making $20 billion annually, maybe the governments of the day will now take the industry very serious and put in place policies that can allow free flow of filmmakers on the continent and create a unified African market, not just a unified block African sectorial blocks of markets, but a unified African market to help us unite all the cinemas, network all the cinemas, network all the industries, and see how best we can uplift the country's film industry. And I think this is a step in the right direction, and I'm so excited about this initiative that has been taken. So, I'm so excited about this. I wish I can go on and on, but honestly, this is indeed a great initiative that they have taken, and I'm looking forward to seeing what lies ahead after this initiative. I think soon enough, after the whole event, perhaps getting to next year, we'll get to know how these things are faring. And I wish them all the best in their endeavors, particularly what they have done so far. And BSIFF, the Black Star International Film Festival, helmed by none other than Juliet Asante, indeed has helped bring a lot of things in the country. They organized the Africa Cinema Summit last year, and they brought the likes of Idris Elba, who was a speaker at that event and came to unveil the plans he had for Africa together with his partners. And I think I'm praying for all the support she can get to even make it bigger, to become Africa's film festival. Not in a sense it is, but I'm hoping it becomes so big and so prominent like the way Cannes Film Festival is, so that one way or the other, the world over will put serious or much respect on what BSIFF is doing in Africa, and actually become one of the film festivals that can that become one of the film festivals whose films that qualify, or win, will be considered for the Oscars. That is the level I'm hoping it gets, because we have to have some of these institutions and infrastructures become so big and relevant on the global stage that we cannot be ignored when we make a statement one way or the other. So I'm personally excited as to all this that is happening, and I'm looking forward to the future, because it looks like the future is really, really bright rather than being bleak or dark, as we thought some of the industries are suffering and not going to work. So, I mean, it is quite exciting. Let me know what you think with regards to this particular development as to BSIFF IFF, that's the Black Star International Film Festival, led by Juliet Asante, brokering a deal where films will be distributed among the West African countries, regardless of whether it being an Anglophone country or a Francophone country. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave them in the comment section below. And all too soon, I've come to an end of this episode of the Film Mandate. And these are exciting stories I was so happy to share. And let me know what you think about all these stories. And I'll come your way again as well with exciting stories in tomorrow's live stream. And thanks so much for joining me. And my name is Papa Otu, and this has been the Film Mandate. I'll see you soon.